There is a kind of tiredness that sleep cannot touch. It lives beneath the surface, quiet, patient, invisible to everyone around you. It is not the tiredness of doing too much. It is the tiredness of being too much, of holding too much, of becoming, over time, the person everyone leans on and never, not once, being asked if you are okay. You learned early that strength was a gift you could offer. And so you offered it. Freely. Completely. Every time. But somewhere between being someone's anchor and losing your own ground, something shifted. The role became the identity. The armor became the skin. And now you carry it all with a steady voice, a calm face, and a heart that is quietly exhausted in ways no one has ever thought to ask about. The weight no one sees. There is a particular kind of person in every circle. You know them. Or perhaps you are them. They are the one who answers the phone at midnight. The one who remembers everyone's anniversaries, everyone's fears, everyone's breaking points. The one who shows up, always not because they are asked, but because somewhere along the way, showing up became who they are. They do not complain. They do not collapse in front of others. When their own life is unraveling, they still ask how you are doing, and they mean it. That is the strangest part. They genuinely mean it. From the outside, this person looks like a gift. Reliable, grounded, unshakable. People gravitate toward them the way water finds low ground naturally, inevitably, without thinking about it too much. And the strong one receives this, holds it, carries it, but there is something no one thinks to look for. Beneath the steady voice, there is a voice that is tired. Beneath the calm eyes, there is a person who has learned very carefully, very early how to make their own pain take up less space, how to fold their needs into something smaller so that there is more room for everyone else. They sit with friends in crisis and feel deeply for them. They offer the right words, the warm presence, the unwavering patience. And in that silence, if they allow themselves to feel it, something aches. Not from lack of love. They love deeply, but from a quiet, persistent longing to be on the receiving end of what they so freely give. To have someone notice the shadows under their eyes. To have someone say, "You don't have to be okay right now." To have someone hold space for them, the way they have held space for everyone else. It rarely happens. Not because the people around them are cruel, most of them are not, but because the strong one has trained the world, without realizing it, to see them as someone who does not need tending. They have been so consistent, so capable, so present, that the people who love them have simply stopped imagining that they might be struggling. And the strong one, for their part, does not correct this. They smile. They deflect. When someone asks, "How are you?" that reflexive, social question, they say, "I'm fine. A little tired, but good." This is not dishonesty. It is something more complex. It is a pattern so deeply ingrained that it no longer feels like a choice. It feels like breathing, like gravity, like who they simply are. But this is the quiet truth that this story wants to sit with. Strength, when it is never allowed to rest, becomes a kind of loneliness. And loneliness, when it is carried with a smile, becomes the heaviest thing of all. The strong one does not need pity. They have never wanted that. What they carry with dignity and love. But dignity should not require silence. And love, real love, should not only flow in one direction. This is where the story begins. Not with a crisis. Not with a collapse. But with a quiet, honest recognition that somewhere inside the person who holds everyone else together, there is a person who has never been held, and they are tired. In ways that words have never quite been allowed to say. How strength became a survival skill. No one is born the strong one. It is not a personality trait that arrives fully formed. It is not written into the DNA, sealed into the character before the first breath. It is something that is learned slowly, quietly, and almost always in childhood, in the years when the world is still being figured out and the rules of love are still being written for the very first time. To understand the strong one, you have to go back. Not with blame, not with anger, but with the kind of gentle curiosity that asks, what did this person have to learn in order to feel safe? For many who grow up to become the default caretaker, the early environment held a particular emotional texture. Perhaps there was a parent who was loving but emotionally unavailable, present in body but distant in feeling, unable to receive or reflect the child's inner world. Perhaps there was instability in the home, financial stress, illness, addiction, unpredictability. Perhaps someone left. Perhaps someone stayed but was always on the edge of falling apart. In these environments, a sensitive child begins to do something remarkable. They begin to watch, to attune, to read the room before they even know what reading the room means. They notice when a parent's shoulders are tense. They sense the shift in atmosphere before a word is spoken. And they adapt, because adaptation, for a child, is survival. If being small and needy caused tension in the home, they learn to be less needy. If crying made a parent withdraw, they learn to stop crying. If being the calm, capable one earned approval, a rare softening in a difficult face, a moment of warmth, they learned to be that, again and again, until it became second nature. This is not weakness, it is intelligence. It is a child finding the shape that fits the space they are given and doing it brilliantly. But here is what no one told them. The strategies that keep a child safe do not always keep an adult whole. The child who learned to suppress their needs in order to maintain emotional peace in the household grows into an adult who suppresses their needs in every relationship, not because they are forced to, but because it is the only way they know how to be. The pattern runs so deep, so early, so automatically, that it does not announce itself as a pattern. It announces itself as personality. There is also something else that forms in childhood for these individuals. An unconscious belief about what makes them lovable. For many strong ones, the belief never stated aloud, rarely even consciously held, is this: I am valuable because I am useful. I am loved because I do not burden anyone. If I ask for too much, I will be too much. This belief is tender and painful and utterly understandable. It was formed by a child trying to make sense of their world with the tools available to them. And it served a purpose. Once, it created safety in an unsafe environment. But beliefs formed in fear have a way of outliving their usefulness. The adult still carries this belief into friendships, into relationships, into the quiet spaces between interactions. They overextend. They silence themselves. They give and give not only out of love, though love is genuinely there, but out of a deeper, older fear, that if they stopped, they would no longer be wanted, that if they showed their difficulty, they would become a burden, that the love they receive is conditional on their strength. This is the origin of the exhaustion. Not just the giving, but the fear beneath the giving, the invisible pressure of a person who believes, somewhere in the oldest part of themselves, that their need for care is something to be managed, minimized, and kept very quietly out of sight. They did not choose this. It was chosen for them, long before they had the language to understand it. And that, more than anything, deserves compassion. What psychology says about the caretaker pattern. Psychology has many names for what the strong one experiences. None of them are diagnoses. None of them are labels to be worn with shame. They are simply maps, ways of describing terrain that many people have walked without ever having a name for it. One of the most relevant frameworks is attachment theory, the study of how early bonds with caregivers shape the way we relate to others throughout life. Psychologist John Bowlby, who first developed this theory, described how children develop internal working models of relationships based on what they experience early on. If those early experiences taught a child that their needs were unwelcome, or that love required performance, the child develops what researchers call an anxious attachment style, a pattern characterized by hypervigilance to others' emotional states, difficulty trusting that love is stable, and a tendency to prioritize connection at the cost of self. The strong one often operates from this place, always scanning, always attuning, always managing the emotional temperature of the room, because somewhere in the nervous system there is an old, quiet alarm. If I stop being useful, I will be left. There is also another pattern that appears frequently in the psychological profile of chronic caretakers: the fawn response. Most people are familiar with fight, flight, and freeze, the three primary stress responses identified by early stress researchers. But psychotherapist Pete Walker identified a fourth: fawn. The fawn response is the impulse, under perceived threat or relational stress, to appease, to smooth over conflict, to absorb discomfort, to make oneself small and pleasing in order to avoid rejection, anger, or abandonment. For the strong one, the fawn response has often become habitual, so automatic that it no longer feels like a stress response at all. It feels like being a good friend. It feels like being mature. It feels like not making things about yourself. But the nervous system knows. The body knows. Chronic emotional suppression has measurable physiological effects. Research in psychoneuroimmunology, the study of how emotional states affect the immune and nervous systems, shows that people who consistently suppress their emotional expression carry higher levels of physiological stress, even when they appear outwardly calm. Over time, this kind of internal holding, this sustained effort to contain one's own emotional reality, is genuinely taxing on the body. There is also the concept of emotional labor, introduced by sociologist Arlie Hochschild, which describes the work of managing one's own emotions in service of another person's comfort or well-being. While Hochschild first applied this concept to paid service work, it maps precisely onto what the strong one does in their personal relationships, constantly reading emotional cues, calibrating their responses, suppressing their own feelings so that the relational atmosphere remains safe and smooth. Emotional labor is real work. It is cognitively demanding, emotionally draining, and crucially, almost entirely invisible. Because it leaves no visible trace, it is rarely acknowledged, rarely reciprocated, and rarely even recognized as effort at all. The strong one does not receive a receipt for this work. They simply carry it. And then there is self-silencing, a concept developed by psychologist Dana Jack to describe the way individuals, particularly in close relationships, suppress their authentic inner experience in order to maintain connection and avoid conflict. Self-silencing is not simply staying quiet. It is an active, ongoing internal process of monitoring, judging, and suppressing one's own thoughts and feelings before they are allowed to surface. Jack's research found that chronic self-silencing is closely linked to depression, not because of external circumstances, but because of the gradual erosion of the self that occurs when a person consistently makes themselves invisible in the spaces where they are supposed to be known. This is the clinical language for something the strong one has always felt but rarely named, that in trying to be everything for everyone, they have slowly, quietly disappeared from their own life. The quiet resentment, you never speak. There is a feeling that the strong one rarely admits even to themselves. It moves beneath the surface of their generosity. It lives in the pauses between the giving. It is not a loud feeling. It does not arrive with anger or accusations or slammed doors. It is quieter than that, more uncomfortable precisely because of its quietness. It is resentment, and the moment that word is spoken even silently, even in the privacy of one's own mind, it arrives with a companion: guilt. How can I resent the people I love? How can I be resentful when I chose to be there for them? But resentment is not the opposite of love. That is the misunderstanding. Resentment is what love looks like when it has been giving without receiving for too long. It is not a character flaw. It is a signal, a quiet, persistent signal from the self that something is out of balance. The strong one has given, generously, genuinely, consistently. They have shown up in ways that people do not always fully see: the 2 a.m. phone calls answered, the advice offered during their own hard seasons, the emotions set aside so that someone else's emotions could have room. They have done this not to earn anything. They have done this because they care, because they love, because this is who they are. But there is a deeply human need, one that no amount of self-sufficiency can erase, to be met. To give and to receive, to love and to feel loved in return in the specific language of being seen, being cared for, being held. And when that does not come, when the strong one looks around and realizes that the care they give so naturally does not seem to naturally return, something closes off, slowly. They begin to notice things they tried not to notice before. The friend who always calls in crisis but is somehow unavailable when the strong one is struggling. The partner who assumes everything is fine because the strong one has never clearly indicated otherwise. The family member who says, "You're so strong, you don't need anyone," meaning it as a compliment, not knowing it is the loneliest thing they could say. And the strong one watches all of this, feels all of this, and says nothing, because there is another layer to this silence, one that goes deeper than fear of burdening others. There is a profound ambivalence about their own needs, a part of them that has internalized the belief that needing is weakness, and that expressing a need makes them the very thing they have spent their life trying not to be: difficult. So they perform the opposite. They minimize. "Oh, I'm fine." They deflect. "Let's talk about you." They rationalize. "They have so much going on, I can't add to it." They wait, quietly, patiently, for someone to notice, without being told, and the waiting becomes its own kind of pain. There is also something profound and sad in the way the strong one often cannot ask for what they need, not because they do not know what they need, but because asking feels like a kind of defeat, like an admission that the role they have built their identity around is somehow failing. If they are the strong one, and the strong one is the one who does not need, then needing feels like losing themselves. This is the inner conflict at the heart of their exhaustion. They are caught between the deep human hunger to be cared for and the deeply conditioned belief that caring for themselves or allowing others to is something they have not earned the right to do. And so the resentment lives there, unnamed, unexpressed, growing slowly in the dark, not because they are ungrateful, not because they are bitter, but because somewhere in them there is a person who has been quietly waiting for a long, long time for someone to ask if they are truly okay, and mean it, and wait for the real answer, the moment something breaks or wakes. It does not always happen dramatically. There is no single moment where the strong one breaks in a way that announces itself no visible collapse, no scene that others witness and understand. Most of the time, the turning point is private, barely perceptible to anyone else. A quiet interior event that happens in an ordinary moment, in an ordinary day. It might happen in a car, parked outside a grocery store, or waiting at a red light, with no one watching. The radio is playing something soft. The day has not been particularly hard, or perhaps it has, but in the ordinary way that days are hard for them, the way they have learned to absorb, and then, without warning, something moves through them. Not sadness exactly, more like a wave of recognition, an exhale that comes from somewhere older and deeper than the present moment. I am so tired, not of this day, not of this errand, but of the sustained, accumulated weight of years of being the steady one, the holding one, the one who keeps things together so that others do not have to. Or perhaps it happens differently. Perhaps it is a birthday their own that passes without the kind of care they have so carefully extended to others. They checked in on a grieving friend every week for a year. But today, when it is their day, the silence is loud. Not everyone forgot. Some people sent a text, but no one showed up, not in the way they always show up. And the contrast, so quietly noticed, lands somewhere deep. Or perhaps it is a moment of need, a genuine one, rare for them. Something difficult has happened, something they cannot carry alone, and they reach out, carefully, guardedly, to someone they trust. And the response, not cruel, but insufficient, makes them realize that the dynamic they have lived inside for so long runs deeper than they thought, that they have shaped themselves into a role that does not easily make room for their own vulnerability. These moments do not destroy the strong one, but they crack something open, and in that crack, for the first time in a long time, light gets in, not comfortable light, not immediately healing light, but the particular illumination that comes from finally being honest with oneself about something that has been silently true for years. This is not sustainable. This is not enough. Psychologists describe this kind of moment as a threshold experience, not a breakdown, but a breakthrough disguised as one. The moment when the psyche, having reached the edge of what it can carry in the old way, begins to signal urgently that something needs to change, that the pattern, however familiar, however functional it once was, is costing too much. For many strong ones, this moment arrives with grief, because recognizing the truth that they have been lonely inside their strength, that they have needs that have gone unmet, that they do not know how to ask for what they deserve, means letting go of an identity that has, in many ways, served them. Strength kept them safe. Strength made them valuable. Strength was how they knew who they were. But the grief is not a sign that something has gone wrong. The grief is the sign that something has finally been seen. There is a particular kind of courage required in this moment. Not the courage of continuing to carry, they know that courage well, but the quieter, more frightening courage of putting some of it down, of letting themselves be, for once, the person who does not have everything together, the person who is still figuring it out, the person who needs. It is not weakness. It is, perhaps for the first time, the truest form of strength they have ever shown. And it begins not with action, not with grand declarations, but with a single, silent, profoundly honest admission. I cannot keep going like this. And I do not have to. Learning to receive the hardest thing. There is a particular discomfort that arrives when someone tries to care for the strong one. It is not ingratitude. It is not indifference. It is something stranger and more tender than either of those things. When someone offers genuine care, when they ask with real attentiveness, "How are you really doing?" and wait for the real answer, something in the strong one tenses, deflects, wants to redirect the conversation. Receiving, it turns out, is its own skill, and it is one the strong one was never taught. For someone whose entire relational identity has been built around giving, being on the receiving end of care can feel deeply unfamiliar, even threatening, not because care is unwelcome, but because accepting it requires vulnerability. And vulnerability, for this person, is the thing they have spent years, perhaps decades, learning to minimize, to manage, to keep out of sight. To receive is to need is to risk. And risk, in the nervous system of the strong one, carries the old echo. If you need, you might be left. So the healing does not begin with a grand opening. It begins with something much smaller, a moment of choosing not to deflect, a sentence left unredirected, a question answered honestly instead of bravely. "Actually, I haven't been okay. I've been really struggling." These are small words, but for the strong one, they are revolutionary, because they require breaking, consciously and deliberately, the oldest rule in their unwritten handbook: do not be a burden. And in breaking it, in watching the world not collapse around them when they finally allow a need to be visible, something begins to shift. Slowly, unevenly, but genuinely. Healing for the strong one is not dramatic. It does not arrive in a single therapeutic breakthrough or a pivotal conversation that changes everything. It arrives in accumulation, in the slow, patient practice of allowing their inner world to be as real and as present as everyone else's. It arrives in the moment they let a friend bring them soup without immediately saying, "Oh, you didn't have to do that." It arrives when they cry in front of someone and do not apologize for it. It arrives when they say, "I need help with this," and wait, resisting the impulse to immediately add, "But don't worry, I'll figure it out." It also arrives in the interior work, in sitting with the questions that have no easy answers. Why do I believe my needs are too much? What would it mean to be cared for and still be worthy of love? Who am I, if I am not the strong one? That last question is perhaps the most tender, because identity, once formed, does not release itself easily. The strong one has been their role for so long that the role and the self have become difficult to distinguish. And the work of healing includes the slow, compassionate excavation of the difference. This is the pattern I learned. This is the person beneath it. The person beneath it is not weak. They are not helpless. They are not asking to stop being loving or present or generous. They are asking for something much more modest and much more radical at the same time: to be allowed to be human, to have good days and hard days, to give and to receive, to love deeply and to be loved in return, not for their usefulness, not for their steadiness, but for the full, complex, sometimes struggling, beautifully ordinary reality of who they are. Boundaries, too, become part of this learning. Not walls, the strong one knows walls, knows what it is to live behind them, but membranes, structures that allow genuine connection while also protecting the self. The ability to say, "I don't have the capacity for that right now," without guilt dismantling the sentence before it is finished. This is not learned overnight. It is practiced, awkwardly, imperfectly, over time. But every small act of honest receiving is a kind of repair, a signal sent to the oldest, most frightened part of the self. You are allowed to exist here, too. Your needs are not too heavy. You are not too much. The world does not end when the strong one rests. In fact, it becomes a little more honest. There is a different kind of strength that has no performance in it. It does not hold its shoulders back or keep its voice steady when everything inside is trembling. It does not answer, "I'm fine," out of habit or kindness or old fear. It does not give from depletion and call it love. It does not carry the weight of everyone's world and mistake exhaustion for virtue. This strength is quieter, less visible, harder to wear as an identity, but it is more real than anything the strong one has ever held. It looks like a person who has learned, after a long time, that the most honest thing they can offer another human being is not their endurance, but their truth. That showing up authentically, with their full complexity intact, is not a burden. It is an invitation for real intimacy, the kind that cannot exist when one person is always a pillar and the other is always leaning. Relationships breathe differently when the strong one steps down from the role. There is an evenness that enters, a realness, the people who stay, who adjust, who rise to meet the strong one's honesty with their own, reveal themselves as the ones worth keeping. And the relationships that required the performance, that functioned only on the condition of the strong one, never needing anything, those reveal themselves too, not as failures, but as chapters that were always meant to close. This is what integration looks like, not the erasure of everything the strong one was, but the expansion of it. An addition, not a replacement. They are still caring, still present, still capable of holding space in ways that are genuinely remarkable. But now they hold space for themselves as well. Now they bring their own weight to the table, trusting that the table is strong enough that the people who love them are capable of bearing witness to a full human being, not just a capable one. There is a particular peace that comes on the other side of this, not the peace of having solved something, but the peace of having stopped fighting the self. The peace of a person who has looked honestly at the armor they built in childhood, thanked it for its service, and begun slowly, imperfectly to lay it down. What remains when the armor is lowered is not weakness. What remains is a person, whole and unfinished and tired in the normal ways that rest can actually heal. Strength is the willingness to be known fully, vulnerably, honestly by the people in whose presence you choose to exist. The strongest thing the strong one ever does is this. They sit across from someone who loves them, and instead of asking, "How are you doing?" first they wait, they breathe, and when the other person asks, "How are you, really?" they answer, fully. Without editing themselves into something smaller or more convenient or easier to receive, they answer as a person who has earned the right to have an inner life, who has always had that right, who is only now, finally, beginning to use it. And perhaps that is where all of this has been leading. Not to a stronger version of the person who holds everyone together, but to a freer version, someone who gives because they genuinely want to, not because they are afraid of what happens if they stop. Someone who has learned through all of this that being held is not the opposite of being strong. It is, perhaps, the deepest expression of it. The exhaustion of being the strong one does not end with a decision. It ends with a slow, tender, ongoing return to the self that was always there beneath the role, waiting, quietly, to be allowed to rest.